All right. The Caucasus Campaign, July to November of 1942. All right. My understanding is that this is kind of incorporated into Stalingrad 42. So this game is kind of outdated a bit, but I'm interested to try it. Okay, so we got table of contents, introduction, contents, sequence of play outline, the initial phase, stacking, zones of control, movement, combat, combat modifiers, combat results, retreats, advance after combat, mobile assaults, supply, special units, air and naval support, replacements, special rules, how to win, the campaign game, the tournament scenario, extended example of play, hints on play, historical summary, designer's notes, and credits. Okay. Introduction. The Caucasus Campaign is a game covering the Axis invasion of the Caucasus during the year 1942. The game starts after the capture of Rostov and ends in the middle of November when the Soviet offensive to the north at Stalingrad starts. One player controls the Axis forces, the other the Soviet forces. Scale. One hex is 18 miles, 29 kilometers. Each turn represents 1 week. Okay. Contents. Inventory. Each game of the Caucasus Campaign contains the following: 1 map, 1.5 counter sheets, this rule booklet, 1 6-sided die, 2 identical player aid cards. Okay. How to read the units. Attack strength is the strength the unit contributes when attacking. A number in a yellow box means the unit provides an armor shift in both attack and defense. Superscript number is used for mountain and forest combat. Okay. Defense strength is the strength the unit contributes when defending. A number in a yellow box means the unit can only cancel an armor shift. It can only cancel an armor shift. It cannot provide one. Movement allowance is the base number of movement points, MPs, the unit may expend for movement in the primary movement phase. White box denotes the unit does not count for stacking purposes, has no zone of control, may not be used in a determined defense, and if alone in a hex, does not receive a defensive terrain bonus. Okay, I should be looking at these pictures. So this is the white box they're talking about here. So that's the attack strength, defense strength, movement allowance, and this is the white box. And then this is the yellow box they were talking about for the armor shift. Do they have one? Here's the yellow box in the middle. You can cancel the attacker's armor shift, right? Unit size: 2 eyes is a battalion, 3 is a regiment, 10 is a brigade, 2 X's is a division, 3 X's is a corps, 4 X's is an army, 5 X's is a front. Plus means the unit is reinforced, okay? Sample combat units. The Soviet 12th Cavalry Division of the 17th Cossack Cavalry Corps. Unit size at the top, the setup hex code, the unit ID, their particular name, the parent formation's ID, the unit type symbol, that's cavalry. The movement allowance is 4, defense strength is 3, attack strength is 3. The German 4th Bicycle Regiment. The white circle denotes a bicycle movement, okay? The German 454th Security Division. The black box denotes restricted movement, okay? The German 97th Jaeger Division. The superscript number is used for mountain and forest combat. The turn of arrival and entry hex is in the top right corner. The color of the box indicates the unit's TQ. I don't know what TQ stands for. Soviet Azov. Well, let me just look it up now. Why not? 224. Troop quality. Okay, that's what it stands for. The Soviet Azov Flotilla. The blue circle denotes Sea of Azov movement. Soviet armored train. R denotes unlimited rail movement. The German 191st Stug Brigade. Unit type silhouette. The yellow box around the attack strength indicates the unit provides an armor shift on attack and defense. The star indicates the unit has a special arrival rule. And the white box means it does not stack, there's no zone of control, and there's no defensive terrain bonus. And there's no determined defense symbol. No determined defense symbol. I don't know what's the determined defense symbol. Don't know what that means. Air and naval markers, air support. CRT column shifts right or determined defense modifier. Black Sea Fleet, okay. German Luftwaffe 7th Flak Regiment. The yellow box around the defense strength indicates the unit can only cancel the attacker's armor shift. Soviet 2nd Guards Division. The triangle indicates the unit starts on its reduced side. Soviet Black Sea Headquarters. The parentheses denote the defense strength restriction. Okay, I'm not sure what that means yet. Do I want to look it up now? Just quickly. Defense strength restriction. Okay, it can only be used. This defense strength can only be used if it's the only unit in X. And that's what that means. Sample markers. Axis control marker, Soviet control marker, replacement marker, disrupted marker, assault marker, victory point marker, out of supply marker, road supply marker, rail movement marker, auto elimination marker. Okay. A lot of unit types in this one. I feel like at least my initial reaction is this feels like there's more types of units than in Holland 44, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay. But not by much. Not by that much. Okay, summary of unit types. All units are either mechanized or non-mechanized. All non-mechanized units, except cavalry, are foot units. Non-mechanized, so this is all the same as Holland 44. Non-mechanized is infantry, bicycle infantry, you don't have those in Holland 44. Mounted infantry, you don't have those in Holland 44. Jaeger, you don't have those in Holland 44. Security, NKVD, you don't have that. Naval infantry, you don't have that in Holland 44. Headquarters, port garrison, you don't have that in Holland 44. And cavalry, you don't have that in Holland 44. This is, I think, a higher level of command. So it makes sense that you'd see more types of units. Mechanized, armor, Panzer Grenadier, motorized infantry, flak, anti-tank, commando, Stug, armored train, Azov flotilla, Soviet tank. Churchill, Stuart, T-26, BT-5. Unit colors. Tan is the Soviet Regular Army and Air Force. Dark brown is the Soviet Navy. Red is the Soviet Guards. White is the Soviet NKVD. Gray is the German Wehrmacht. Black is the German SS. Medium blue is the German Luftwaffe. Medium green is the Romanians. Dark blue are the Slovakians. Yellow are the Italians. And yellow ochre are the Turkomans or Ost troops. Okay. Troop quality. All units are rated at one of 3 troop quality TQ levels: elite, regular, or low. The troop quality affects combat, should be A, affects combat and determined defenses, and is indicated by the color of the unit type box. Elite is red, low is light yellow. Regular is gray for Axis and brown for Soviets. Soviet NKVD and naval brigades have different troop qualities depending on whether they are attacking or defending. NKVD. On defense, treat them as elite units and as regular units when attacking. Naval brigades. In an attack, treat them as elite units and treat them as regular units when they're defending. Okay. Headquarters. Headquarters units have a regular troop quality. Units without a unit type box. All units that have no unit type box have a regular troop quality. Specifically, Soviet tank brigades, including the Guards Tank Brigade, armored trains, Stug brigades, port garrison units, and the Azov flotilla. Okay. No unit type box. But how does that interact with the fact that some of these only have a silhouette? This is the unit type box. These just have the silhouette. Stug brigades. Okay, so yeah. Port garrison units. I think we saw one of those. No, we saw it in the right. Okay, so basically anything with a silhouette does not has a regular troop quality. Got it. The map. The map depicts the area of the Kuban and the Caucasus where the campaign was fought. See the terrain effects chart for a complete list of terrain features and their effects on movement and combat. Seasonal marsh hexes. Seasonal marsh hexes are considered rough terrain until turn 10. At that time, they are treated as marsh hexes, and the minor river hex sides adjacent to seasonal marsh hexes are ignored. Okay. Design note, the Kuma River does indeed end in the marshes and does not reach the Caspian Sea until the rainy season. Okay. Mountain passes. Starting on turn 10, all mountain passes, except the Krestovi Pass on the Georgian Military Highway, become closed due to snowfall. No movement, combat, or supply tracing is allowed across a closed mountain pass. Okay. Design note. During World War II, the Georgian Military Highway was the only road across the high Caucasus Mountains that was passable during the winter. And it's interesting that I've played what's it called? The UN campaign. It's a DCS Huey helicopter campaign that takes place in Georgia, where you spend a lot of time flying through the Caucasus Mountains. So I've gotten some exposure to them, and it's pretty rough terrain. It's difficult terrain to move through. The unfinished railroad. The railroad between Astrakhan and Gudermes, I have to learn how to pronounce these, Astrakhan and the Gudermes, starts the game unfinished and may not be used until turn 8. Once finished, this railroad can only be used for a line of supply. It may not be used for rail movement. The road in those hexes can always be used for movement and limited supply. Okay. Historical note. When it became apparent that the Axis were going to cut the rail line that connected the Caucasus to the north through Salsk, the Soviets quickly built this replacement line. It was built so quickly that in many parts they just laid the rails right on the hard desert floor. I could find no evidence that the Soviets used the line to move troops. All records indicate that troop movement occurred by sea via Astrakhan and Makhachkala. I would assume the rail line was used to carry petroleum from Baku to the north. Okay. Sochi, how do you say that? Sochi to the Sukhumi Railroad. I gotta learn how to pronounce these right. The stretch of railroad from Sochi to Sukhumi can only be used for line of supply. It may not be used for rail movement. Okay. Designer's note. Since the majority of Russians reinforcements for Tuapse arrived by sea, it appears this stretch of railroad was not yet completed in late 42, or was in disrepair from constant air attacks. Okay. Rivers that flow through hexes. When a river flows through a marsh or major city hex, it is completely ignored. The effects of the river as a movement hindrance and a defensive aid have been mitigated by the surrounding terrain. Okay. So when you see this, think this. Okay, is this supposed to be a marsh hex? Oh, this is a major city. I see. So this is marsh, right? Okay, so when you see it going through the marsh hex, just imagine that it's just marsh. And when you see it going through a major city, just imagine that it just cuts off through the city. Got it. Hex terrain. If a hex has two or more natural terrain types in it, use the most predominant type in the hex and ignore the others. For example, hex 2235 contains forest, clear, and a little bit of rough. This hex is considered a forest hex. Man-made terrain can add to the natural terrain in the hex. For example, Novorossiysk, I don't know how to pronounce that right, is a forest hex with a minor city. Okay. Does that mean that the DRMs are like stack on top of each other? Not sure about that. Hex control. A player controls a town, major city, minor city, or entry hex if he occupies it or was the last player to pass through the hex. At the start of the game, the German player controls Rostov, Kagalnik, and Taganrog. The Soviet player controls all other towns and city hexes. Keep track of who controls the important VP hexes with the axis control markers. Sequence of play outline. The Caucasus Campaign is played in game turns. A game turn is composed of 2 player turns and 1 victory check phase. Each player turn is subdivided into several phases and impulses. Every game turn is played in the following order. Axis player turn. Axis initial phase. Place reinforcements on their entry hexes. Roll on the axis replacement table and record the replacement on the replacement track. Roll for weather if this is turn 6 through 14. Place any headquarters previously removed. Axis primary impulse. Axis primary movement phase. Flip Axis and Soviet air support markers to their ready side. The Axis player conducts movement and may receive replacements. Axis primary combat phase. The Axis player conducts all his combats. Soviet secondary impulse. Soviet secondary movement phase. Flip Axis and Soviet air support markers to their ready side. The Soviet player conducts movement at a reduced rate, may conduct mobile assaults, and designate units that will assault. Soviet secondary combat phase. The Soviet player may attack with all of his units that have been designated for an assault. Axis secondary impulse. Same as the Soviet secondary impulse, but switching the term Soviet with Axis. Okay. Axis supply phase. Check the supply status of all Axis units. Roll for attrition of all isolated Axis units. Remove all disrupted markers from Axis units. B. Soviet player turn. Soviet initial phase. Place turn track reinforcements on their entry hexes. Draw 3 random reinforcements from an opaque cup and place them on the map. Roll on the Soviet event table and implement the result. Place any headquarters previously removed. Soviet primary impulse. Same as the Axis primary impulse, but switching the term Axis with Soviet. Okay. Soviet supply phase. Same as the Axis supply phase, but switching the term Axis with Soviet. Victory check phase. If one side has achieved a sudden death victory, the game ends. If not, record the completion of a game turn by advancing the game turn marker 1 box. Okay. The initial phase. So that was the outline. Now we're going to talk about the initial phase. Reinforcements and entry hexes. Let me just come back here. Right, so that was sequence play. Now we're doing the initial phase. Reinforcements and entry hexes. Each player's reinforcements are listed on the turn record track. Reinforcements enter play during the friendly initial phase by being placed on an appropriate entry hex. Entry hexes. Entry hexes are labeled with letters from A to J and represent single or multi-hex entry hexes. Axis entry hexes are indicated by the German Balkenkreuz, while Soviet ones are indicated with a Soviet red star. Entry hexes from F to J are considered normal hexes for all game purposes. Entry hexes along the north map edge, A to E, are considered special hexes. They are treated as clear terrain hexes, and enemy units may not enter or attack into these hexes. Placement of reinforcements. Stacking limits may be exceeded during initial placement. A unit may be placed in an enemy zone of control. This placement does not cost any movement points. A reinforcement may move normally on the turn of entry. Blocked entry hexes. If all available entry hexes are enemy controlled, reinforcements may be delayed until an entry hex is available. Reinforcements that arrive on entry hexes can be delayed every turn. Note that entry hexes along the north map edge cannot be enemy controlled, and so cannot be blocked. Okay, I don't have the map available to look at, so it's hard to visualize this. German reinforcements. Most Axis reinforcements arrive at entry hexes A, B, C, as indicated on their counters. Ost troops, the Italian Alpine Corps, or Corps, Blücher reinforcements, and units with a J as an entry hex arrive differently, as described below. Entry hex J, Taman. Entry hex J starts the game blocked. It may only be used if it has been captured and currently Axis controlled. If J is not Axis controlled, they may be delayed until it is, or delayed one turn and arrive at any A entry hex. Okay. Italian Alpine Corps. On the initial phase of turn 5, the Axis player rolls for the Italian Alpine Corps. On a roll of 1 or 2, it arrives as a reinforcement that turn at any A entry hex. On a roll of 3 to 6, it does not enter. It marches north to the Don River and protects the German 6th Army flank at Stalingrad. The arrival of the Alpine Corps on the Caucasus front requires the Axis player to gain 20 victory points to win, instead of 18. Interesting. Blücher 2. This was the code name for the transfer of 11th Army divisions across the Kerch Strait. In the first Axis initial phase, after the Axis player controls the Taman hex, he receives the 2 divisions in the Blücher 2 box as reinforcements. They are placed in entry hex J. Okay. Ost troops. These were insurgent troops from the Caucasus or disgruntled Soviet POWs willing to ally with the Axis forces. If the Axis player has control of both Krasnodar and Voroshilovsk during his initial phase of turn 7 or later, during his initial phase of turn 7 or later, he must raise the 3 Ost units. To do this, take the 3 Ost units from their holding box and roll 1 die for each. The result of the die is the number of turns later the unit arrives in play as a reinforcement. For example, if a 1 is rolled, the Ost unit would arrive the next turn. On the turn of its arrival, it can be placed as a reinforcement in any friendly controlled major or minor city hex that is on a connected rail hex and not in an enemy zone of control. Soviet turn track reinforcements. All Soviet reinforcements listed on the turn track arrive at entry hex E or are placed in the East Caspian holding box. If placed in the East Caspian holding box, they can arrive as a reinforcement at Astrakhan, Makachkala, or entry hex F in the next Soviet initial phase. On turns 4 and 5, place the air support marker on the available side in the air box. On turn 7 or later, place the 4th Guards Cavalry headquarters in a hex containing cavalry units. Okay. Soviet random reinforcements. These reinforcements represent formations that were raised locally or were rebuilt from the survivors of the disastrous Crimean campaign. At the start of the game, place all Soviet units with a white star in their upper right corner in an opaque cup. Each turn, starting with turn 1, during the Soviet initial phase, the Soviet player may draw 3 units from the cup as reinforcements. At least one unit must be placed in Tbilisi, if possible. If Tbilisi is Axis-controlled, then that reinforcement is lost and placed in the cadre box. The other 2 may be placed on a front headquarters in full supply, or on any friendly controlled major city on a connected rail hex. Okay. Only 1 per hex, unless a front headquarters is located on a major city, in which case 2 may be placed there. If insufficient arrival locations are available, then the unit or units are lost and placed in the cadre box. Note: there are a total of 6 possible entry locations for Soviet random reinforcements: Astrakhan, Tbilisi, Krasnodar, Grozny, and the 2 Soviet headquarters units. Okay. Important. Most Soviet random reinforcements arrive at reduced strength. These units are indicated with a triangle on their upper left corner, upper right corner, and their star on their reduced side. Okay. If the Soviet player draws a none, he does not receive a unit for that particular draw. He still receives the other units that were drawn. The German replacement table. On turns 2 through 6, the Axis player receives 1 replacement per turn. The type of replacement received is determined by rolling on the Axis replacement table. Record the replacement with a replacement marker on the replacement track. See Rule 17 for full details on replacements. The results are described below. German regular infantry. 1 replacement for any German infantry division or the bicycle regiment. German elite infantry. 1 replacement for any any German Jaeger or mountain division. Axis. 1 replacement for any Romanian, Italian, Slovakian, or Ost unit. Cavalry, infantry, motorized infantry, or mountain infantry. Use the Romanian colored REPL marker for these nationalities. Replacement marker. Any infantry. 1 replacement for any of the 3 types above. I see. So these are different chits that you can draw. And depending on the chit that you draw, that determines what kind of replacement you can get. You can spend the chit to get a replacement of the designated type. Got it. German mechanized. 1 German mechanized replacement may be used on a Panzer or Panzergrenadier, including the 5th SS Division, the Felmy Corps, or a Stug Brigade. Special. 1 replacement of any type, or take a Flak or Brandenburger from the cadre box. Play note. The replacement table is the only way the other 2 German Stug units enter play. Okay. Hitler takes command. Starting on turn 7, the German replacement rate is increased to 2 replacements per turn. 1 replacement is determined by the replacement table, but the second may be of any type. The German player may decide the type after he sees his replacement die roll. Okay. Got it. Design note. Hitler relieved his Army Group commander, List, and took over control of Army Group A. The positive effects of this change of command is hard to gauge, but it is clear that in September and October, replacements began to arrive steadily, and the Panzer, Mountain, and Jaeger divisions were brought up to full strength. Okay. The Soviet event table. The Soviet player rolls on his event table each Soviet initial phase, starting on turn 1. The results are described below. If the result is a replacement, see Rule 17.0. Naval Brigade. The Soviet player receives a Naval Brigade from the Naval Brigade holding box. The unit must be placed as a reinforcement on any friendly controlled port hex on the Black Sea coast. It may be placed in an enemy zone of control. Okay. If all naval brigades have already entered, I read that as blockade at first. It's not a blockade, it's a brigade. If all naval brigades have already entered play, then the Soviet player receives one infantry replacement. Infantry replacement. The Soviet player receives one infantry replacement, which is recorded on the replacement track. Cavalry replacement. The Soviet player receives one cavalry replacement, which is recorded on the replacement track. Lend-Lease tanks. The Soviet player receives a tank brigade from his Lend-Lease box. The unit is placed as a reinforcement in entry hexes F or G. If all tank brigades from this box have already entered play, then treat this result as no effect. Turkish Front Division. The Soviet player receives a division from his Turkish Front holding box. The unit is placed as a reinforcement in entry hexes G or H. If all Turkish front divisions have already entered play, then the Soviet player receives one infantry replacement. Black Sea Fleet Sorties. The Soviet player places one of the Black Sea Fleet markers in the available box. It may be used at any time. If both Black Sea Fleet markers are already available or have been removed from play, then treat the result as no effect. Okay. Weather. Starting on turn 6, roll for weather. Each turn, during the Axis initial phase, the Axis player rolls one die and consults the weather table. The result remains in effect for the duration of the turn. Okay. Good weather. No effect. Poor weather. Neither player receives his secondary impulse, movement, and combat phases. There is no effect on the primary impulses. Air support and Black Sea Fleet markers may be used in the primary impulse during poor weather. Design note. The weather marker was inadvertently left off the counter sheet. Please use a spare marker as a substitute. 5. Stacking. Stacking limits. Stacking occurs when multiple units are in one hex. The stacking limit for both sides is 3 units. There is no limit to the number of markers, including air and naval markers, that may be in a hex. Free stacking units. One of each of the following units may stack in a hex for free. These units are marked with a white square around their counter. Headquarters, a German Stug, German Flak, German Commando, Soviet anti-tank, Soviet armored trains, Soviet port garrison. One of each of the following units. So you can have one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this. Okay, got it. Stacking restrictions. The stacking limit can be exceeded during the course of movement, retreat, advance after combat, and placing reinforcements. The stacking limit must be strictly observed at the completion of each movement phase, at the instant of a mobile assault, and at the end of any retreat or advance after combat. The owning player must correct all stacking violations at these times by eliminating enough units from the hex to satisfy the stacking limit. Zones of control. I do wonder, like, what is this simulating? By eliminating the units, what is it? Is that a faithful simulation of what would actually happen? I feel like you would instead get a marker saying like you're disorganized or something. Yeah. Zones of control. General rule. The 6 hexes immediately surrounding a hex occupied by one or more units constitute the zone of control of those units. An enemy zone of control is abbreviated as EZOC. There is no additional effect when one or more friendly units each project a zone of control into the same hex. Which units exert a zone of control? All units exert a zone of control except those with a white square around their counter. All markers, including air and naval markers, do not have zones of control. Okay. Zones of control and movement. It costs 2 additional movement points to exit a enemy zone of control. It costs no additional movement points to enter an enemy zone of control. This is different from Lee Moves North, where you have to pay to both enter and exit. A unit does not have to stop moving when it enters an enemy zone of control. A unit may move from enemy zone of control to enemy zone of control as long as it can pay the movement point cost. Zones of control and terrain. Zones of control extend across all hex sides except those hex sides that are impassable to all units. Specifically, zones of control do not extend across alpine hex sides except at open mountain passes. Zones of control do not extend across a lake or all-sea hex sides. Other effects of zones of control. Rail movement. Rail movement is not allowed if the unit starts in an enemy zone of control. Retreats. A stack of units can be eliminated or suffer a step loss if it retreats into an enemy zone of control. If the unit starts in an enemy zone of control. Interesting, okay. Line of supply. A line of supply cannot be traced through a vacant hex in an enemy zone of control. Okay. 7. Movement. The basics. During a friendly movement phase, let me look at, so we're here. During a friendly movement phase, the player may move all, some, or none of his units as desired. Each unit has a movement allowance, MA, that is the number of movement points, MPs, it may expend for movement. Each hex entered, and some hex sides crossed, cost a certain number of movement points as determined on the Terrain Effects Chart, TEC. Movement may be made by individual units or by stack. If units are moved as a stack, they move at the rate of the slowest unit in the stack. A unit or stack may not enter a hex occupied by an enemy unit. You must complete the movement of one unit or stack before starting to move another. All unused movement points are lost. They may not be accumulated. Units with a 0 movement allowance may never move. Roads and bridges. A unit that follows the path of a road may use the reduced rate of the road. Whenever a road or railroad crosses a river, a bridge is assumed to exist. Okay? Example of movement and zone of control. Units pay 2 additional movement points to exit an enemy zone of control. So a unit with a movement allowance of 6 can move through 2 hexes in an enemy zone of control. So it's 1 movement point to move in clear terrain, plus 2 to move into or move out of an enemy zone of control. So this is an enemy zone of control. It's moving out of this hex into this one, so it has to pay 3. And then again, this is an enemy zone of control, so it's moving out of that hex, and so that's 3. Got it. And same thing here. Clear enough? The primary movement phase. All friendly units can move up to their full movement allowance. The following types of special movement are allowed in the primary movement phase: extended movement, rail, and sea movement. Okay? Extended movement. All units may use extended movement in the primary movement phase to increase their movement allowance by 2 MPs, if they do not end their move in an enemy zone of control. Got it? Units can use extended movement even if they start their move in an enemy zone of control. Got it. Okay. Rail and sea movement. Rail and sea movement is only allowed in the primary movement phase. Units that use rail or sea movement in the primary movement phase may move normally in the secondary movement phase, but not by rail or sea. A unit may not combine both rail and sea movement in the same movement phase. Okay? Sea movement. Only the Soviet player may use sea movement. A unit using sea movement may move from a friendly controlled port to another friendly controlled port on the same sea. Sea movement is not allowed to enemy controlled ports, even if they are vacant. This costs the unit its entire movement allowance. A maximum of 1 unit on each sea, Caspian, Black, and Sea of Azov, may use sea movement during the primary movement phase. The Sea of Azov is further restricted to only naval brigades. The Sea of Azov was extremely shallow and subject to air attacks. Okay. The port of embarkation or debarkation may not be in an enemy zone of control, unless assisted by an air support. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't run into this. Yeah, I mean, I've only read the rules for Holland 44, so there was no naval movement in that. Rail movement. Both players may use rail movement. A unit using rail movement may move an unlimited distance along a railroad. Each side may move a maximum of 1 unit by rail movement each friendly primary movement phase. Units using rail movement must start on a rail hex and follow a path of contiguous rail hexes. Units that use rail movement may not start in an enemy zone of control, nor at any time enter an enemy zone of control. Units that use rail movement may not enter an enemy-controlled city, major or minor, or town hex. Units with a 0 movement allowance may not use rail movement. Usable rail hexes. To use a rail hex for rail movement, that hex must be connected by a contiguous path of rail hexes, free of enemy units and their zones of control, to a friendly controlled major city or a friendly controlled entry hex. Okay, got it. Off-map railroad. A railroad is considered to connect Tbilisi with entry hex F. However, a unit using the link must stop its rail movement at the far end of the link, Tbilisi or entry hex F. Only the Soviet player may use the off-map railroad. Okay, well, I don't have access to the map, so I don't know what it's talking about right here. Sochi to Sukhumi and the unfinished railroad. These 2 stretches of railroad may not be used for rail movement, only for supply. Okay. The secondary movement phase. During the secondary movement phase, all friendly units can move again. Mechanized and cavalry units may move their full movement allowance and may conduct mobile assaults. Foot units may move only 1 hex or attack. They cannot do both. The 1 hex falls under the rules of minimum movement, so movement point costs are ignored. Extended movement, rail movement, and sea movement are not allowed in the secondary movement phase. Assault markers. Mechanized and cavalry units that wish to attack in the combat phase of the secondary impulse must spend 3 movement points to do so. Foot units that wish to attack in the combat phase of the secondary impulse must not move. Indicate mechanized and cavalry units that have spent 3 movement points and foot units that have not moved and plan to attack with assault markers. These will be the only units that are allowed to attack in the combat phase of the secondary impulse. Mechanized and cavalry units may always move 1 hex and assault, even if they have insufficient movement points to do so. Okay. Minimum movement. In both the primary and secondary movement phase, a unit that is allowed to move can always move at least 1 hex. even if it does not have sufficient movement points to do so. The only restriction is that it may not enter or cross prohibited terrain. Strategic road movement. Strategic road movement is allowed in both the primary and secondary phases for both mechanized and non-mechanized units. Mechanized units that spend their entire movement allowance moving along the path of a road and do not enter or exit an enemy zone of control may use the reduced road rate of 1/2 movement point per road hex. Why do you only pay that rate if it's the entire? Okay. Non-mechanized units that spend their entire movement allowance moving along a road and do not enter or exit an enemy zone of control may move 1 extra road hex. Note that this would allow a foot unit to move 2 road hexes in the secondary impulse. In the primary movement phase, strategic movement is cumulative with extended movement. For example, a mechanized unit with a movement allowance of 6 that uses extended movement and strategic movement could move 16 road hexes. So the movement allowance is 6 plus 2 would make 8, and then you use strategic movement, so you pay 1/2 movement point per hex, and that's how you get 16. Got it. Mechanized units and difficult terrain. Mechanized units may never enter a marsh or mountain hex unless following the path of a road. Mechanized units must stop upon entering a forest hex if not following the path of a road. River hex sides. It costs 1 additional movement point to cross an unbridged minor river hex side. Units may not cross an unbridged major river hex side unless they began their movement next to the river hex side and their first move is to cross that river hex side. It costs 1 additional movement point to cross a major river hex side. So I guess this is simulating bridging units. Marsh, mountain, and alpine hexes. Marsh. All non-mechanized units must stop upon entering a marsh hex, unless they are moving along a road. Each marsh hex costs 2 movement points. Mechanized units are prohibited unless moving along a road. Mountain. All non-mechanized units, except mountain infantry, must stop upon entering a mountain hex, unless they are moving along a road. Each mountain hex costs 2 movement points. Alpine. No units may enter the alpine hexes. Units may cross alpine hex sides at mountain passes only. Units with special movement rules. There are 4 types of units with special movement rules. The Azov Flotilla, Armored Trains, the 4th Bicycle Regiment, the 454th Security Division. Okay, so before I go into combat, let's look at this example here. Examples of movement. The cost to enter each hex is noted. Unit A, here, starts adjacent to a major river hex side, here, so can cross it at a cost of 1 additional movement point. Since exiting an enemy zone of control costs 2 movement points, it spends a total of 4 movement points to cross the river. So it's 1 to enter clear terrain, plus 1 to cross the river, plus 2 to exit the enemy zone of control. Got it. Unit B, right here, must stop upon entering a marsh hex, here, if not following a road. Got it. Unit C, here, must stop upon entering a mountain hex, if not following a road. Unit D is a mountain infantry unit, so does not have to stop when entering a mountain hex. And you know it's mountain infantry because it has that little triangle at the bottom of the infantry symbol. It uses extended movement to move 2 mountain hexes. I don't know how much a mountain hex costs. I don't have the terrain effects chart at hand. Units E here and F here use extended movement to increase their movement allowances to 5. Unit G, well, okay, first of all, so it costs 2 to enter the woods, and then another 2 to enter the woods, and then 1 to enter, what is this, mountains? Oh, but it's moving along the road at that point. And then F is moving along the road. No? Looks like it's moving along the road. Oh, I think you only get the half movement point bonus if your entire movement is along the road. Which makes me wonder if it might be able to move further if it moved along the road instead of going across cross-country here. Okay. Unit G here must pay 2 additional movement points to exit each enemy zone of control. So to exit this one, it has to pay 2, so it pays a total of 3 to go here. And then this is also an enemy zone of control, but so it pays again to exit this one. Unit H here uses minimum movement to move 1 hex, which would have cost 4 movement points otherwise. I see, so it has a movement allowance of 3, but it's able to do a move that should have cost 4. Got it. And it's 4 because I think it's 1 to enter clear terrain, I think 1 to cross the minor river, and then 2 to exit the enemy zone of control. Unit J is a mechanized unit that must stop upon entering a forest if not following the path of a road. Got it. Combat. General rules of combat. Phasing units may attack adjacent enemy units in both friendly combat phases. Attacking is voluntary. No unit is ever required to attack. No unit may attack or be attacked more than once per combat phase. All defending units in a hex must be attacked as one combined defense strength. The attacker may conduct his attacks in any order and need not pre-designate them. You must complete each attack, including retreat and advance after combat, before proceeding to the next one. Primary and secondary combat phases. The primary and secondary combat phases are identical, with the exception that only units marked with assault markers may attack in the secondary combat phase. Multi-hex combat. An enemy-occupied hex may be attacked in one combat by as many friendly units as the attacker can bring to bear from the surrounding hexes. However, no single attack may target more than one hex. No single attacking unit may have its combat strength divided and applied to more than one combat. Units in the same hex can attack adjacent defenders in different hexes, as long as each attack is conducted separately. Units in a hex containing an attacking unit need not participate in that combat or in any attack. Combat procedure. Follow these steps for each combat. Step 1. Compare the combined attack strength of the participating attacking units against the total defense strength of the involved defending units, and express the comparison as a numerical odds ratio, attacker to defender. Round off this odds ratio downward to conform to one of the odds ratio columns found on the combat results table, CRT. For example, a 15-4 would round down to a 3-1. Step 2. The attacker must decide if he is committing any air support or Black Sea fleet markers to the combat. Step 3. After taking into account column shifts, the die is rolled and the results are implemented. In the following order: A. Remove any step losses. B. Perform the determined defense, if applicable. C. Perform retreats. D. Perform advance after combat. Minimum and maximum odds. Combat at odds less than 1 to 2 are not allowed. Combat at odds greater than 9 to 1 is an automatic elimination. Attacker and defender column shifts are applied before the minimum and maximum restriction. For example, 11 to 1 odds with 2 shifts left would use the 9 to 1 column. It would not be an automatic elimination. Automatic elimination. Combat phase. If 10 to 1 odds are achieved in the combat phase, the defenders are eliminated without a die roll, and the attacking units may advance after combat. Movement phase. An automatic elimination can occur during a primary movement phase, not a secondary movement phase, when the phasing player has moved enough units adjacent to an enemy unit or stack, and those units have enough attack strength and column shifts, including air support and Black Sea fleet shifts, to guarantee at least 10 to 1 odds against the defending hex. At that point, the defending units are removed. All units that made the 10 to 1 possible are marked with auto-elimination markers. They cannot move any further that movement phase, nor take part in combat in the following combat phase. The phasing player can move other units into and through the hex as if no enemy unit was located there. The units marked with auto-elimination marker may, at any time in the subsequent combat phase, advance after combat as if the combat was resolved on the CRT, at which time the markers are removed. Okay, what's this? Example of automatic elimination. The 3 German units in hexes A and B, here and here, have moved adjacent to the Soviet unit, here. The odds are 21 to 3, so this one has a combat factor of 10, and 5 is 15, and 6 is 21. This has a defense of 3. So 21 to 3 is 7 to 1. Shifts for air, this plane, armor, I guess that's the yellow, and troop quality, bring it to a 10 to 1. Oh, it's, which one indicates the armor shift? Is yellow the troop quality? Let's look this up again. Yellow box, armor shift. Okay, where's the troop quality? I don't remember. The color of the unit type box. Okay, so because these boxes are red, that means that they are elite. Okay. So that's the troop quality shift. So those 3 shifts bring it to a 10-to-1, making it an automatic elimination. The other 2 German units that have not yet moved, so this one, and did not take part in the combat, can conduct their movement ignoring the Soviet unit. So you don't have to, this one doesn't have to get stopped, this one doesn't have to worry about zones of control. Got it. Okay. Combat modifiers. Halving. When halving, always have by individual unit, not stack, and round any fractions up to the next higher whole number. For example, 2 units with an attack strength of 5 would have a combined attack strength of 6 after halving, because the first one gets halved to 2.5, which gets rounded up to 3, and then the same with the other one, and so combine it and it's 6. No unit may ever have its attack strength halved more than once for a given attack. For example, an out-of-supply 10 attack strength panzer division, which is halved because it's out of supply, attacking across a river hex side, which also halves it, would have an attack strength of 5, so rather than 3. Defensive terrain bonuses. In particular terrain, the defender receives defensive terrain bonuses, DTBs. These are strength point additions to the hex, not per unit. Refer to the terrain effects chart for a complete list of DTBs. A defender can only receive 1 DTB. Always use the most favorable to the defender. The defensive terrain bonus can never exceed the combined defense strength of the defender stack. Factors in excess are ignored. Free stacking units defending alone in a hex do not receive defensive terrain bonuses. Okay. I don't know that Holland 44 has this. I'm not sure if that Holland has that. Holland 44 has that. For example, a 2-2-3 brigade in a mountain hex, which gives a +5 defensive terrain bonus, would receive only a +2 and have a modified defense strength of 4. So its initial defense strength is 2. The mountain hex can convey up to +5 to the combat strength or the defensive strength. So in this case, it's a maximum of 2, and then the total is 4. Got it. 2 5-7-3 divisions in a mountain hex would have a total defense strength of 19. 7 plus 7 plus 5 from the mountain hex. Simple enough. River hex sides, mountain passes, and marsh hexes. Attacking across a river, mountain pass, or out of a marsh hex affects the attacker's attack strength. Units attacking across river hex sides, bridged or unbridged, major or minor, have their attack strength halved. Units attacking out of a marsh hex, along a road or not, have their attack strength halved. Units attacking across a mountain pass, along a road or not, have their attack strength halved. Mechanized units and difficult terrain. Mechanized units have their attack strength reduced to 5 when attacking into a mountain or marsh hex, along a road or not. If the attack strength is currently below 5 factors, then this rule is ignored. Apply this 5-factor limit before any halving. For example, an out-of-supply 10 attack strength panzer division, which is halved because it's out of supply, attacking into a mountain hex side, which has a maximum of 5 factors, would have an attack strength of 3. You first reduce the attack strength from 10 to 5 because of this rule, and then you have it to 2.5, which gets rounded up to 3. Got it. The armor shift. Attacker. If the attacker has an armor unit, tank, panzer, Stug, or panzer grenadier divisions on their full strength side, involved in the combat, and the defender has neither an armor unit nor an anti-tank unit, then the attacker receives a shift of 1 column to the right on the CRT. Okay, examples of combat. 3 German units here, plus the +2 air support marker, this one here, are attacking 1 Soviet unit here. The odds are 12 to 5. So this one's 5, plus 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. This one has a defense of 5, so 12 to 5, which gets rounded down to 2 to 1. The Stug brigade provides an armor shift, this yellow thing here. And the air support provides 2 shifts. Is that number? Let's see. Air support marker. CRT column shifts right. Okay, got it. So this, because this is a 2 here, that's why it gives 2 shifts. The final odds are 5 to 1 because it starts at 2 to 1 plus 3 shifts. Got it. B. 3 German units are attacking 2 Soviet units. 2 of the German units are halved, attacking across a minor river. These 2, this one and this one. The odds are 14 to 7. So this one is 5, attack strength of 5. This one is attack strength of 10 halved to 5, so that's 5 plus 5 is 10. This one is 3.5, rounded up to 4, so that's 10 plus 4 is 14. Yep. And then this one has a defense of 5, this one has a defense of 2, so those get added together, and that's how you get 7. And 14 to 7 is 2 to 1. The German player receives 1 shift for having a higher troop quality. I guess that's this red, and maybe this red as well. And 1 shift for armor because of the yellow. The final odds are 4 to 1. So you take the 2 to 1 and you get 2 shifts, that's 4 to 1. Got it. Okay, so that was the armor shift. Defender. Okay, so defender armor shift. If the defender has an armor unit in the combat and the attacker does not, then the attacker must shift his attack 1 column left on the CRT. Anti-tank units. The Soviet anti-tank regiments, the German Flak regiment, and the reduced strength German Panzergrenadier divisions do not provide a shift, but can cancel a shift caused by attacking armor. Eligible units are indicated with their defense strength in a yellow box. Got it. We saw that already here, this one. Terrain restrictions. The armor shift cannot be gained for either side if the defender is in a forest, marsh, city, major or minor, or mountain hex. Okay? In addition, the attacker, not the defender, may not gain an armor shift if attacking across a major river hex side, but may when attacking across a minor river hex side. Okay? The troop quality shift. Attacker. If an attacker has a unit participating in the combat with a higher troop quality than all of the opponent's participating units, then the attacker receives a favorable shift of one column right on the CRT. Wow. Okay, so this is a powerful shift. Because in Holland 44, the way it works is, I think it's like the majority of your units have to be higher quality to get that shift. And in this case, it's just one of the units has to be higher quality. Defender. Oh, but and I think in Holland 44, it doesn't matter what the defender has. If the majority of the attacker's units are superior quality, then you get the shift, regardless of whatever the defender has. So that's another difference. That's an interesting difference. Defender. If the attacker has only low troop quality units attacking, and the defender has at least one elite troop quality unit in the hex, then the attacker suffers one shift left on the CRT. Okay. I don't remember if Holland 44 has a defender troop quality shift. Miscellaneous modifiers. Out of supply, disruption, Soviet Black Sea Fleet, Brandenburgers, air support. Okay. 10, combat results. Where are we in this? Combat results. Okay. Yeah, we're good. Explanation of combat results. The words attacker and defender refer only to the units participating in the combat in question, not to the general strategic situation. D1. B. The defender loses one step. Oh, so these are the different results you can have on the CRT. Surviving defenders must retreat 4 hexes, no determined defense allowed, and become disrupted. The attacker may advance after combat. So I guess the defender chooses which unit suffers a step loss. A1D2. The attacker loses one step. The step loss is chosen by the defender, and the defender loses 2 steps. The attacker may select one of the 2 steps removed. If the defender had only 1 step to lose, then the attacker loses none. Surviving defenders must retreat 4 hexes. No determined defense is allowed, and they become disrupted. The attacker may advance after combat. D1. The defender loses 1 step. Surviving defenders either retreat 2 hexes or conduct a determined defense. The attacker may advance after combat if the defender retreats. DR. The defender must either retreat 2 hexes or conduct a determined defense. The attacker may advance after combat if the defender retreats. A1D1. Each side loses 1 step. The unit that takes the step loss is determined by the owning player. Surviving defenders either retreat 2 hexes or conduct a determined defense. The attacker may advance after combat if the defender retreats. Okay. EX. Exchange. Each side loses 1 step. The unit that takes the step loss is determined by the opposing player. No retreat for the defenders. If the defender had only 1 step involved, then the attacker may enter the vacated hex and stop. A normal advance after combat is not permitted. A1DR. The attacker loses 1 step. The defender must either retreat 2 hexes or conduct a determined defense. The attacker may advance after combat if the defender retreats. A1. The attacker loses 1 step. No retreat for the defender. Selecting step losses. Normally, the owning player selects the unit that will take the step loss, unless he is mandated to take a step loss from his lead unit during a determined defense, or if an exchange or A1D2 was rolled. When selecting the unit to take the step loss, yours or your opponent's, you must follow this priority. First, select a full-strength unit. This includes single-step units. If there are no full-strength units, then select a unit that is flipped over to its reduced side. If there are only remnants or, Kampfgruppe? What's KG stand for? I think that stands for Kampfgruppe. Where are the acronyms? Is it at the end? Oh. Oh, that's the first time it appears. Oh, Kampfgruppe. Yeah. If there are only remnants or Kampfgruppes, then select one of those. I don't know what that is yet. Indicating step losses. Flipping a unit over indicates the unit has suffered a step loss. If it is a one-step unit, or the unit is already flipped, then it is placed in the cadre box or removed from play. Okay. Don't know why is it called the cadre box? Large units. All German infantry, Panzergrenadier, Panzer divisions, and the 5 Soviet rifle corps form a remnant or Kampfgruppe unit when they take their second step loss. The remnant must abide by any retreats of the CRT result. Okay. For example, the 3 steps to the 5th SS Division. So this is the full strength side, this is the reduced strength side, and this is the remnant. Note, the German Jaeger and Mountain divisions do not form remnant units. These divisions had only 2 regiments. Okay. Oh. Determined defense. A determined defense represents a counterattack or a hold at all cost order. Procedure. The defender may attempt to cancel the retreat portion of a D1, DR, A1D1, or A1DR result on the CRT by using the determined defense table. He may not cancel the retreat in a D1B or A1D2 result. He may only do a determined defense if at least one step survived the combat. A successful result on this table will allow the unit or stack to ignore the retreat and the attacker's advance after combat is cancelled. Note that step losses from the CRT are implemented before resolving the determined defense. If there are 2 or more surviving units in the defending stack, then the defender picks one unit as the lead unit. This unit determines any die roll modifiers and will be the unit to suffer the step loss if one is called for. Eligibility. All units may perform a determined defense except disrupted units, and those units with a white square around their counter. Okay. Column to use. The terrain of the hex determines which column the defender uses. If there is a choice, for example, a town and a clear hex, always use the column most favorable to the defender. Defensive support. Players may use either an air support or Black Sea Fleet marker to provide an additional die roll modifier, DRM, to the determined defense die roll. Defensive air support provides a +1 DRM unless it's the 8th Flieger Corps, which gives a +2 DRM. Okay. A Black Sea fleet marker, coastal bombardment, provides a +2 DRM. The Black Sea fleet is only allowed on coastal hexes along the Black Sea. Players may use only one air or naval support marker for defensive support in each determined defense, either one air support or one Black Sea fleet marker. So not both. Die roll modifiers. +1 if the lead unit's troop quality is elite, -1 if the lead unit's troop quality is low, +2 for the Soviet Black Sea Fleet support, and +1 for air support, or +2 if it's the 8th Flieger Corps. Explanation of results. The determined defense is successful, the retreat is cancelled. So I guess that's what the dot is, if you get a dot result. So if you get the dot result, the determined defense is successful and the retreat is cancelled. If the result does not have a bullet, then the determined defense fails, and the defender must retreat 2 hexes. -1. The defender's lead unit takes a step loss. 1/1. The defender's lead unit takes a step loss, and the attacker loses 1 step. Attacker's choice. Okay. Single step defenders. This would be clearer if I had the CRT in front of me. Single step defenders. If the defender had only 1 step, and that step was lost in a successful determined defense, the attacker may enter the vacated hex and stop. A normal advance after combat is not permitted. Retreats. Sure, let's do this. Retreats. Retreat procedure. Procedure. When called upon to retreat by the CRT, units must be retreated 2 or 4 hexes, depending on the result, with the exception of 1 hex retreats. The owning player may determine the path. A stack of retreating units may divide and retreat to different hexes. General rule. A unit that retreats 2 hexes must end its retreat 2 hexes away from the hex it occupied when the combat was resolved. A unit that retreats 4 hexes must end 4 hexes away. Units that cannot do this are eliminated. Units must follow these guidelines when retreating, listed in the order of priority. Retreat in such a way as to eliminate the fewest steps possible. If possible, retreat to a hex that is in full supply. If not possible, retreat to a hex that is in limited supply. Retreat to a hex where stacking limits are not exceeded. If not possible, the units are retreated 1 additional hex by the attacker, following priorities number 1 and number 2 above. By the attacker. So the defending units are retreated 1 additional hex by the attacker. Okay. Retreat to any hex. Elimination and step loss due to a retreat. Retreating in an enemy zone of control can cause either elimination or a step loss. Elimination. Units with a 0 movement allowance are eliminated if they retreat. Other units are eliminated if they retreat A. off the map, or into a hex or across a hex side. They are prohibited from entering or crossing in the movement phase. Okay. into a hex occupied by an enemy unit. Okay. C, across a hex side that lies directly in between two enemy units possessing a zone of control. See hex side 1 in the example below. This is the Zachband rule. Friendly units that are not part of the retreat and that occupy the hex being retreated into will negate this penalty. Okay. Being retreated into. Okay, got it. D. If you're retreating into a hex that lies, I think it's like you lose a step. That's what we're talking about here. They are eliminated. So retreating units are eliminated if they retreat into a hex that lies directly in between two enemy units possessing... Wait, what? Oh, this is the other way that the Zachband can work, I think. So retreating units are eliminated if they retreat into a hex that lies directly in between two enemy units possessing a zone of control. Friendly units that are not part of the retreat negate enemy zones of control in the hex they occupy for this purpose. Got it. So this is, yeah, these are the two ways that the Zachband can work. Retreating units are eliminated if they retreat into a hex in an enemy zone of control after the first hex of retreat. Friendly units that are not part of the retreat negate enemy zones of control in the hex they occupy for this purpose. Step loss. A stack of units will only lose one step total, not per unit, if it enters an enemy zone of control that does not qualify for cases C and D above. Friendly units that are not part of the retreat negate enemy zones of control in the hex they occupy for the step loss purpose. The defender may select the step loss as described in 10.2. Okay, so this... Okay, so I think it's... These are rules for elimination. This is less severe. So this is the Zachband. If you enter a Zachband where you have two zones of control, two interlocking zones of control, that's when you're eliminated. This is if you just have one unit creating a zone of control. So in that situation, you're not totally eliminated, you just take a step loss. Got it. Unfulfilled retreats. If the defender retreats only one hex, or does not retreat at all because the units are eliminated, the attacker still receives his full advance after combat. Combat against previously retreated units. If a unit or stack is retreated into a friendly occupied hex, and that hex undergoes an attack in the same combat phase, the retreated units do not add their defense strength to the combat, and they may not be used for a determined defense. And if it's required to retreat again, they are eliminated. Exception. If the attack is a mobile assault, then the previously retreated unit does add its defense strength to the hex. Okay, don't know what a mobile assault is yet. Disruption. Any unit that retreats on a D1B or A1D2 result becomes disrupted. There is no further effect if a disrupted unit is forced to be disrupted again. Because the reason they say this is because in some rules, some games, if a disrupted unit becomes disrupted again, it gets eliminated. Place a disrupted marker on such units after their retreat is completed. Disrupted units are penalized in the following ways. They may not end their movement in an enemy zone of control. If attacked, the attacker gains 1 column shift right on the CRT if 1 or more units in the defender's hex is disrupted. Ooh, that's brutal. They may not be the lead unit in a determined defense. Okay? They may not perform 1 hex retreats. They may not receive replacements. Abilities. Disrupted units retain their full defense strength and their zone of control. A unit may enter or pass through friendly disrupted units without becoming disrupted. Recovery. At the end of each player turn, during the friendly supply phase, all friendly disrupted units automatically recover. 1 hex retreats. A 2 hex retreat can end after only 1 hex if the retreating unit or stack is not disrupted and enters a town, city, major or minor, marsh, forest, or mountain hex. Units that must retreat 4 hexes can never stop after 1 hex. Units that retreat 1 hex may not end their retreat in an enemy zone of control unless a friendly, non-disrupted unit is already in that hex. Got it. Okay, let's look at this example. Example of retreat. The Soviet units at A and B, here's A and here's B, must retreat. Unit A has a safe retreat path through a friendly unit. So this is a friendly unit, so it can come through there. Note that retreating into hex 1, this one, and 2 here is prohibited because these are ZOC bonds, zone of control bonds, interlocking zones of control. The stack at B here will lose 1 step applied against either unit as it retreats through an enemy zone of control. So because this is not an interlocking zone of control with another unit, it just takes a step loss. It doesn't, the whole stack is not eliminated. Got it. Advance after combat. Length of advance. When allowed to advance by the combat results table, mechanized and cavalry units may advance 2 hexes, and non-mechanized units may advance 1 hex. Units may advance in any direction and are not required to enter the defender's vacated hex. Units with a zero movement allowance cannot advance. Advance and enemy zones of control. Enemy zones of control do not stop an advance after combat. However, no unit can advance from one enemy zone of control directly into another enemy zone of control of the same unit unless it is entering the defender's vacated hex or has entered the defender's vacated hex. See example. Has entered. What does that mean? Example. Oh, advance after combat example. So maybe let's read the rest of these rules and then I'll get to the example. Terrain and advance. No unit may advance into a hex or across a hex side that is prohibited to it in normal movement. Cavalry units must stop upon advancing into a mountain or marsh hex unless advancing down a road. Okay. Mechanized units must stop upon advancing into a forest hex unless advancing down a road. So they can advance into a forest hex. Okay, that's interesting. Major river hex sides. A cavalry or mechanized unit may only cross an unbridged major river hex side during the first hex of its advance. Okay. Out of supply units and advance. Units currently out of supply may advance a maximum of 1 hex. All right, let's look at this example. So just this example here. Advance after combat example. The 2 German mechanized units, okay, these 2 units, have just eliminated the defending unit in this hex here, and may now advance 2 hexes. The solid arrows indicate possible advance paths. The dashed lines indicate prohibited paths. I see. So this guy cannot advance here because he is not advancing into the vacated hex. Oh, interesting. So that's what that rule meant. When this said has entered the defender's vacated hex, it's talking about this move right here. So you can do the first advance into the same zone of control because you're entering the defender's vacated hex, and then you can do the second move because it has entered the defender's vacated hex. Interesting. So I'm guessing the idea there is that the attack itself has had the unit move into this hex. And so what? So why would you be able to move here if you can't move here? I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, the rule is the rule. Right, so this one, right, you can move into this zone of control once, but you can't do it a second time. Got it. And you can advance in any direction. Makes sense. Mobile assaults. Mobile assault procedure. During the secondary movement phases, the phasing player may mobile assault enemy units. For game purposes, a mobile assault is considered a function of movement. Any mechanized or cavalry unit, or a stack of such units with at least 3 movement points, may mobile assault. Okay, so this is similar to the SCS Standard Combat Series concept of exploitation combat. I think that's what they call it, where you're just paying movement points to conduct a combat during your movement phase. Units conducting a mobile assault must have started stacked together or were picked up along the way by a moving unit. Only units that have not yet moved that phase may be picked up. And at the moment they are picked up, they are considered to have expended as many movement points as the moving unit has. Interesting. That's a bit weird. Units conducting a mobile assault must end the movement phase stacked together and cannot split at any time during the movement phase. So this is a bit more restrictive than the SCS, Standard Combat Series, exploitation combat rules. To conduct a mobile assault, the phasing player moves his stack adjacent to the target hex. All of the units conducting the mobile assault must be in the same hex. The stack conducting the mobile assault must then expend 3 movement points. The movement point cost to enter the hex is ignored to attack all enemy units in the target hex. A mobile assault can only be conducted against a single hex. No multi-hex attacks are allowed. The German player may use air support in a mobile assault. The Soviet player may not, nor may he use the Black Sea Fleet. All combat rules, terrain rules, and supply rules are in effect. Units can conduct a mobile assault across a major river hex side only if they started adjacent to the major river hex side. Okay, so that's the example. Let's finish reading the rules before we look at the example. No automatic elimination is allowed in a mobile assault. Odds greater than 9-1 are resolved on the 9-1 column. Combat results table results are applied normally, with the exception that the normal advance after combat rules are ignored. See below. If, as a result of the mobile assault, the enemy hex is vacated, the player performing the mobile assault may, not must, move the stack into the vacated hex at no additional movement cost. The stack conducting the mobile assault may continue moving from the vacated hex or from the hex it attacked from. The stack can even conduct another mobile assault or spend 3 movement points to place an assault marker if it has sufficient movement points remaining. If the result does not clear the hex of enemy units, the stack may mobile assault the same hex again at the cost of an additional 3 movement points, or continue moving without another mobile assault, or spend 3 movement points to place an assault marker on the same target hex of the mobile assault if it has sufficient movement points remaining. Mobile assaulting previously retreated units. Units retreated from one mobile assault may be mobile assaulted again, even by the same enemy stack. Units previously retreated and defending against a mobile assault use their full defense strength and are not eliminated if forced to retreat more than once. Note, the prohibition against being attacked more than once per combat phase does not apply, as a mobile assault is a function of movement, not combat. The same applies to being able to contribute defense strength to a second attack, and being destroyed if forced to retreat a second time. Clarification. Units that are out of supply can conduct overruns, but they have their attack strength halved and may move a maximum of 2 hexes. Okay. But I thought they said that you don't do overruns in this. You just attack at 9 to 1. Well, let's look at this example. Example of mobile assault. With 6 movement points, the 2 German mechanized units above, these ones, have a few options on the sequence of mobile assaults. They could mobile assault hex A, this one, forego the advance, and then mobile assault hex B, here. Or they could mobile assault hex B, advance into the vacated hex, and then mobile assault hex C. Each mobile assault costing 3 movement points, and they have 6. Got it. Makes sense. Supply. General rule. There are 3 types of supply: full supply, limited supply, and out of supply. Supply is checked during the owning player's supply phase. A friendly unit judged to be in full, limited, or out of supply at this time is considered in that state until the next friendly supply phase. Full supply. A unit is in full supply if it can trace a line of supply to a friendly entry hex or to a rail hex, which in turn leads to a friendly entry hex. Limited supply. A unit is in limited supply if it does not qualify for full supply, but can trace a line of supply to a supply port or to a road hex, which in turn leads to a supply port or entry hex. Out of supply. A unit is out of supply if it does not qualify for full or limited supply. During the phasing player's supply phase, place an out of supply marker on all friendly units that are out of supply. Place a road supply marker on all units that are in limited supply. Remove all supply markers that were placed in previous turns from units that are now in supply. Supply sources. Supply originates at entry hexes and ports. These are called supply sources and may provide full or limited supply. Entry hexes. Axis entry hexes are full supply sources for Axis units, while Soviet entry hexes are full supply sources for Soviet units. Only entry hexes that are under friendly control can be used as a supply source. Port hexes. Friendly controlled ports are limited supply sources. A major port provides limited supply for an unlimited number of units. A minor port provides limited supply for up to 3 units. Players may choose from turn to turn what units are in limited supply from a minor port. Exception: if the Axis player captures Temryuk, not sure how to pronounce that, or puts Temryuk out of supply, then the Soviet player may no longer use ports on the Sea of Azov as limited supply sources. This would put the Azov flotilla out of supply. Design note: Temryuk was the major military port for the Soviets on the Sea of Azov, and the Luftwaffe made it too dangerous for shipping to enter the Sea of Azov through the Taman Straits. Okay. Line of supply. A line of supply, LOS, is a path of contiguous hexes traced from a unit to a supply source. The line of supply to a rail hex, road hex, or entry hex may not exceed 5 hexes. Once it reaches a rail or road hex, it may continue from there an unlimited length, but cannot deviate from the rail line or road at any point. A line of supply may not cross an all-sea, all-lake, or alpine hex side, cross a closed mountain pass hex side, enter an enemy-occupied hex, enter a vacant hex in an enemy zone of control. A line of supply may be traced into and through any number of hexes in an enemy zone of control which contain a friendly unit. Connected rail hex. So this is what in Holland 44 I think is called the overland portion of the supply path. They don't use the term overland in this. I'm guessing this is an earlier rule book. Connected rail hex. For convenience, a rail hex that is connected to a friendly controlled entry hex by an unbroken rail line free of enemy units or enemy zones of control will be called a connected rail hex. Mountain and marsh hexes. Full supply is downgraded to limited supply if the line of supply passes through a mountain or marsh hex, unless it passed through the hex via a rail line or road. Full supply is not downgraded simply by entering or exiting a single marsh or mountain hex, or by passing through such hexes via roads. Okay. Entering or exiting. Passes through. I think what this is saying is that if you have a unit that is in marsh or mountain hex, then the line of supply doesn't pass through that hex. It enters that hex. And therefore your unit, which is in marsh or mountain, does have that line of supply. Or if there's a road that goes, if that line of supply is moving along a road, that would also not downgrade it. I think that's what it's saying there. Out of supply effects. A unit bearing an out of supply marker suffers the following penalties. Attack. The unit has its attack strength halved, round any fraction up, and its advance after combat is limited to 1 hex. Defense. If all the defending units in a hex are out of supply, then the attacker receives a column shift right on the CRT. Movement. A unit can move a maximum of 2 hexes. Replacements. Units cannot receive replacements. Limited supply effects. Units in limited supply suffer none of the effects of out of supply, except their attack strength is still halved. Okay. Isolation attrition. During each player's supply phase, all friendly units except headquarters bearing an out of supply marker and are currently isolated, suffer isolation attrition. Okay. Isolation attrition occurs each turn the unit remains isolated. I think this is like an optional rule in Holland 44, if I remember correctly. All friendly units bearing an out of supply marker which are currently isolated. Definition of isolated. All units. Wow, so a unit is isolated if it cannot trace a line of supply of any length across any type of terrain that a non-mechanized unit could enter to a supply source, full or limited. Okay. So if you're really surrounded. Isolation attrition procedure. Roll 1 die for each applicable unit. If the die roll is 1 to 4, the unit is reduced 1 step. A result of 5 or 6 has no effect. A unit can be eliminated, lose its last remaining step, due to an isolation step loss. If a stack is isolated, roll for each unit in the stack. Isolated headquarters are exempt from isolation attrition. They can remain isolated indefinitely. If a stack is isolated, roll for each unit in the stack. Wow. Die roll modifiers. +2 if the unit can trace a line of supply to a friendly controlled major or minor city hex, or a friendly headquarters. Okay. +1 if the unit does not qualify for the +2 above, but can trace a line of supply to a friendly controlled town hex. +1 for all German and Soviet Guards units. -2 if the unit is located in a desert hex. For example, an isolated German unit, +1. Oh, all German, okay. Able to trace a line of supply to a city hex, +2, would lose a step for attrition only on a die roll of 1. Got it. All right, let's look at these examples. Line of supply. So let's look at this one first. Example, units A here and B here are in full supply since they can trace 3 hexes to a rail line. Okay, so this is 1, 2 for B, 1, 2, 3 for A. Unit C and A is tracing through B's hex. Unit C is out of supply because it cannot trace a line of supply through an enemy zone of control. So this hex here is in this unit's zone of control. Units D here and E here are in limited supply because their line of supply was traced through a mountain hex. So D is tracing through E's hex to avoid these zones of control. E is tracing across a mountain hex, which doesn't have a road. Right, through. If E was here, then it would be in supply. Unit F here is in full supply because a line of supply is allowed to exit one mountain hex. Right, that's what I was saying before. Note that the 7 Soviet units in the Novorossiysk pocket, here, are in limited supply. So they're all tracing through each other. Oh, I think they're in limited supply because they can trace to the major city? Or is it tracing to here, this guy, and then this guy's tracing off the map? To a supply port. Okay, right. So they're all tracing to Novorossiysk. Got it. So they can't attack at full strength, but otherwise they're unaffected. All right, let's look at this other example. Example of line of supply. It is the axis supply phase. Unit A here is out of supply and isolated since it cannot trace a supply line into a vacant hex in an enemy zone of control. So this hex is in this enemy unit's zone of control. This one is in, yeah, right. Unit D here. Oh, wait, did I read that? No, units B and C are in full supply. Unit C can trace its line of supply through a friendly unit, B, that is in an enemy zone of control, and then B traces to this rail line here. Got it. Unit D here is also in full supply because it can trace one hex through the mountains to a road hex that leads out of the mountains and to a connected rail hex. The use of the word through there is potentially confusing to people, but yeah, I get what he's saying. You should say like, I guess through is, yeah. Unit E, right, Unit E here is in limited supply. It traces to a supply road 3 hexes away. 1, 2, this one? That's 2 hexes away. Or is it talking about this? 1, 2, 3? Why would it not trace to this? I think this would be going through the mountain hex. So that would be limited supply. This is also going through a mountain hex, so that's also a limited supply. Right. Note that when the mountain passes close, the unit will be out of supply and possibly isolated. Unit F here is in limited supply due to his line of supply passing through a mountain hex. Right. And you can pass through as many mountain hexes as you want. The line of supply to a railroad or entry may not exceed 5 hexes. Got it. So it's not unlimited, right? So you can go 1, 2 to this road here. Got it. Special units. All the following units have special abilities or restrictions. Headquarters. Combat. Cannot attack, and if attacked, their defense strength may only be used if they are the only unit defending in the hex. Okay, I see. May only be selected for step loss if it is the only unit in the hex. Headquarters special functions. If in full supply, they are an entry hex for units arriving from the cadre box. A unit that arrives from the cadre box must be placed on the headquarters before the headquarters moves. Okay. Headquarters provide a modifier on the isolation attrition table to other units. Headquarters themselves are exempt from isolation attrition. Air support markers may only be placed within 8 hexes of a headquarters, even if the headquarters is out of supply or isolated. Replacement. Headquarters have only one step. If an HQ unit is eliminated, it automatically returns to play in the owning player's next initial phase. On the turn of its arrival, it can be placed as a reinforcement in any friendly controlled major city hex on a connected rail hex. or at a friendly controlled entry hex. Any friendly controlled major city hex on a connected rail hex. Okay. It may move and function and function normally that turn. Voluntary removal. An HQ can be voluntarily removed during any friendly movement phase. Even if it is isolated, it returns the next turn as described above. The Brandenburgers. Special Purpose Battalion 800 from the Lehr Regiment, or the Brandenburgers, were elite commandos. The Germans used them in company strength for special missions. Combat. In company strength. Battalion. Okay. This unit can be used as a normal unit with an attack and defense strength of 1, or be used in an attack to receive a favorable shift of 1 column to the right on the CRT. Battalion, okay. If they are used for a shift and did not suffer a step loss, they are automatically removed from play and placed on the turn record track to arrive back into play later in the game as a reinforcement at a friendly HQ that is in full supply or friendly controlled major city on a connected rail hex. Roll 1 die, and the result is the number of turns it is placed down the turn record track. If the die roll is higher than the remaining number of turns, then the unit is removed from play. Replacement. The Brandenburgers have only 1 step. If they are eliminated in combat, they are placed in the cadre box and can be rebuilt only with a special replacement. If they return to play via a replacement, no delay die roll is required. Special replacement. Is that combat? Okay. At start, the Germans used the Brandenburgers to seize the bridge across the Don at Rostov. So they are temporarily out of play when the game begins. Their arrival as a reinforcement is determined by a die roll on turn 1 in the same manner as described above. Example, on a die roll of 1, they would arrive as a reinforcement on turn 2. The Azov Flotilla. The Soviet Azov Flotilla is a mix of light water crafts and marine troops. Movement. In both the primary and secondary movement phases, the flotilla can move to any friendly port on the Sea of Azov, including Taman. It can only move from port to port. It may move from an enemy zone of control to an enemy zone of control, and may move when out of supply. Okay. Combat. The flotilla may attack in both the primary and secondary combat phases. Moving does not prohibit it from attacking in the secondary impulse. If forced to retreat, it may retreat to any friendly controlled port on the Sea of Azov, even if in an enemy zone of control. The flotilla may not advance after combat. Replacement. The flotilla has 1 step and may never be replaced. Once the Axis controls all ports on the Sea of Azov, the unit is eliminated. Okay. Clarification. The Azov flotilla traces supply and suffers attrition like any other Soviet combat unit. Historical note. Elements of the flotilla did escape through the Taman Strait, but was of little value in the deeper waters of the Black Sea. Cavalry units. Cavalry units are the only non-mechanized units that may use their full movement allowance during the secondary movement phase. Non-mechanized, okay. Cavalry units may advance after combat up to 2 hexes. Mountain and Jaeger divisions. Mountain units do not have to stop their movement when they enter a non-road mountain hex. Mountain and Jaeger units use their superscript factors when attacking into or defending in forest or mountain hexes. Okay, so these ones. Armored trains. Armored trains can move an unlimited length along rail lines each friendly movement phase, primary and secondary. They do not pay any movement points to exit an enemy zone of control, but must stop upon entering their first enemy zone of control. Armored trains may only move, retreat, and advance after combat along rail lines. If they retreat off a rail line, they are eliminated. Armored trains can attack in both friendly combat phases after moving an unlimited distance. Armored trains have only one step and may never be replaced. That's an interesting unit. I don't think I've ever used an armored train in any game. Only one step. Not very strong. Guards 4th Cavalry Corps Headquarters. On turn 7 or later, this Cavalry Corps marker becomes available to the Soviet player. During a Soviet initial phase, it may be placed on the map in a hex containing at least one Soviet cavalry division. The headquarter marker's only function is to improve the stacking limit for cavalry divisions in that hex. The headquarters marker and up to 3 cavalry divisions in the hex are counted as a single unit for stacking purposes. The Soviet player may move the cavalry divisions stacked with the headquarters marker to the 4th Cavalry Corps' holding box if he wishes. Cavalry divisions may come and go from the Corps at any time by simply moving into or out of the hex the Corps occupies. There is no additional movement point cost to do so. The Corps marker cannot be removed to satisfy a step loss. Okay. I see. So this is a holding box, I think specifically to represent the units within this that constitute this force, represented by this marker. If all cavalry units in the Corps are eliminated or leave the Corps, it is permanently removed from play. The 4th Bicycle Regiment. The Bicycle Regiment is the only non-mechanized unit that can move along roads at the cost of 1/2 of a movement point per hex. The 454th Security Division. The 454th Security Division arrives on turn 2 at an A entry hex. It must move to Rostov in the German primary impulse of turn 2 and remain there. Okay. It may not move from Rostov unless forced to retreat by a Soviet attack on Rostov. It may never be replaced. Okay. Air and naval support. Air support markers. Air power in general. Each side has air support markers that provide column shifts in an attack or a die roll modifier for the determined defense table. Air support can be used for any attack or defense that is within 8 hexes of a friendly headquarters. Traced from the headquarters to a friendly unit participating in the attack or defense. Okay. Enemy units and terrain have no effect on the path. So there's some like weirdness in this earlier manual, just like odd sentence construction. Indicating use. When an air support marker is used offensively or defensively, flip it over to its used side. At the start of each friendly or enemy impulse, flip air units back to their front ready side. That is, air units may be used once in each impulse, up to 4 times per turn. There are 4 impulses in each clear weather turn. Okay. Offensive air support. Air support can be used offensively, 1 per attack, to shift the combat odds ratio to the right. The 8th Flieger Corps shifts it 2 columns to the right. All other air support markers shift it 1 column. Only the Axis player may use air support during a mobile assault. Defensive air support. The defender cannot use air support for column shifts on the CRT, but he can use air support to modify his determined defense die roll by +1, +2 for the German 8th Flieger Corps. This must be declared before rolling the die, and only 1 air support marker can be used to assist a given determined defense. Combat air patrol for sea movement. The Soviet player may use his air support during his primary impulse to allow sea movement into or out of a port in an enemy zone of control. This costs 1 air support marker for that primary impulse and allows only 1 unit this privilege. See, like this is another example. This cost 1 markers. It's not quite as polished as the later manuals that I've read for this series. Richthofen's 8th Flieger Corps. This air support marker is available only during turns 1 to 3 and turns 12 to 14. It provides a shift of 2 columns right when used offensively, and provides a +2 modifier when used on the determined defense table. Historical note. This air unit, composed of elite ground support squadrons, was diverted north in August for the drive on Stalingrad. It returned in late October to assist the final offensives in the Caucasus. Soviet Black Sea Fleet markers. Naval markers in general. The 2 Soviet fleet markers are placed in the unavailable box at the start of the game. Okay. They may only leave that box due to a result on the Soviet event table. When a fleet marker becomes available, place it in the available box. If it is used for any other purpose, it is placed back in the unavailable box. I say. If the German player captures Poti, the 2 Black Sea fleet markers are immediately removed from play. Okay. Coastal bombardment. A fleet marker can be used in the same way as air support, by providing a shift of 2 columns to the right for any attack on a coastal hex of the Black Sea, or providing a +2 DRM on the determined defense table for any Soviet units defending on a coastal hex of the Black Sea. Amphibious landings. A fleet marker may be used to land a naval brigade in any unoccupied hex on the Black Sea coast. Taman is not on the Black Sea for this rule. The hex does not need to be a port, and the hex may be in an enemy zone of control. The naval brigade must start in Poti and end its movement in the landing hex. Replacements. Receiving replacements. The Axis player receives replacements from his replacement table. The Soviet player receives them from his event table. Replacements are received in the initial phase and recorded on the replacement track as described in Rules 4.5 through 4.7. Purpose and procedure. Replacements are used to restore reduced or eliminated units during the primary movement phase. 1 replacement of the proper type and nationality can restore a reduced unit to full strength or bring a unit out of the cadre box on its reduced side. Units that come out of the cadre box must be placed on either a friendly headquarters in full supply or in a friendly controlled major city on a connected rail hex. For a reduced unit to receive a replacement, it must be in supply, limited or full. No unit may receive more than one replacement per turn. For the Soviet player, an infantry replacement may be used to replace any Soviet infantry unit, including guard rifle divisions and corps, and regardless of troop quality, while a cavalry replacement may be used to replace any cavalry unit, regardless of troop quality. Indicate each unit that receives a replacement, including those that come out of the cadre box, with a replacement marker. That unit may move a maximum of 1 hex in the movement phase, and may not attack in the combat phase of the primary impulse. The replacement marker is removed at the end of the primary combat phase. Large units. Any 3-step unit in the cadre box must be indicated with an appropriate cadre marker when it comes out of the cadre box. Okay, I don't understand the effect of this. Accumulating replacements. Replacements may be saved for a future turn. Use the replacement markers to record accumulated replacements. No more than 3 replacements of any one type may be accumulated. All in excess are forfeited. Special rules. Merging reduced Soviet units. 2 reduced Soviet infantry divisions, 133s, or a reduced Soviet infantry division and an infantry brigade, 223, may merge together to form one full-strength division. So I'm confused. An infantry brigade has more combat attack power than an infantry division? How does that work? I'm confused. And why does it have less defense? 2 reduced. Merging can occur in any friendly movement phase if the 2 units end their movement in the same hex. Overstacking is allowed before merging, but not at the end of the movement phase. A merged unit can take part in the following combat phase. Merging 2 reduced divisions. Remove one of the divisions and place it in the cadre box. Bring the other up to full strength. If the 2 units have different troop qualities, then the unit with the lower troop quality must be the unit that is brought up to full strength. Soviet mountain divisions, NKVD divisions, and guard divisions may not merge. I see. Merging a brigade with a reduced division. In this case, the troop quality of the brigade has no effect. Remove the brigade and bring the division up to full strength. Why would a brigade have more offensive power than a division? And this 3, to me, when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing that it's, okay, yeah, it does make a point. Only regular army brigades can merge, not naval brigades. Okay. Not a step back. In the secondary impulses of turn 1, Soviet units that start in an enemy zone of control may not move in the movement phase. There is no restriction if they advance after combat. Okay. Design note. On July 28th, Stalin issued order number 227 that was a plea to the army to stop the retreat and a warning to officers of severe punishment, see there's a spelling error, if they continue to do so. There's extra space. Oh, maybe it's not. Nonetheless, the Soviet forces in the Caucasus quickly realized that the best strategy was to retreat as quickly as possible. Interesting. Axis withdrawals. In the Axis initial phase of turns 2 and 9, remove the 14th Panzer and 298th Infantry Division, respectively, from play. They must be removed regardless of their position on the map. The 14th Panzer Division was part of the 4th Panzer Army that was diverted north to Stalingrad. The 298th moved north to reinforce the Italian 8th Army along the Don River. If either unit is reduced or eliminated at the time of withdrawal, then the Axis player does not roll on the replacement table that turn. He can still receive the extra replacement due to Hitler's intervention. Is that like an event, I guess? Okay. How to win. Victory points. Certain towns and cities on the map are worth victory points, VPs, for the Axis player. VPs are important for sudden death victory and determining who has won the game at the end. The Axis player keeps track of the number of VPs he has with the VP marker on the victory point track. Standard victory. Axis victory. The Axis player wins by controlling at least 18 victory points worth of victory point hexes, or 20 victory points if the Italian Alpine Corps enters play. Victory is checked only during the victory check phase. Soviet victory. The Soviet player wins if the Axis player fails to achieve victory by the end of the game. Sudden death victory. The German player is under pressure to achieve success quickly, while the Soviet player is under pressure not to give up ground too quickly. Starting on turn 6, each space on the turn track has a benchmark, which indicates the minimum number of VPs, victory points, the German player should have achieved by that turn. The German player wins automatically if he has 7 more points than the benchmark. The Soviet player wins automatically if the German player falls below his benchmark, or if he captures Rostov. If the Soviet player captures Rostov, I guess. Sudden death victory is only checked in the victory check phase. Play continues if neither player has an automatic victory. Design note. Losing by an automatic victory represents being relieved of command. Interesting. Very interesting. The campaign game. Axis setup. There are 10 Axis units which start the game on the map. Their placement hex is indicated on their counter. All Axis units with a turn number in the upper right corner arrive as reinforcements and are placed on the turn track printed on the map. There are 5 units that enter as reinforcements on turn 1. These units may be placed in their entry hexes at start, and the Axis initial phase can be skipped. Place these two Stug brigades with the small star in the cadre box. Place the 3 Italian mountain divisions, the 3 Ost units, and the 2 units for Blücher II in their appropriate holding boxes on the map. Place the 2 German air support markers in the air box. I like how specific it is about where to set things up. Soviet setup. Place the Soviet units belonging to the 12th, 18th, 37th, and 51st Armies anywhere in their respective at-start zones. These units are color-coded for easy identification. There must be at least 1 unit in each hex of the zone, and no hex can have 3 units. Place those Soviet units that have a hex number on their counter in their respective hexes. Units with a triangle on their upper left corner start on their reduced side. All Soviet units with a turn number in the upper right corner, including the 2 air support markers, arrive as reinforcements and are placed on the turn track printed on the map. Place all units with a small white star in an opaque cup. The Soviet player draws 3 of these per turn for his random reinforcements. Place the 4 rifle divisions with a TU in the Turkish front holding box, the 4 naval brigades with an NB in the naval brigade holding box, and the 5 tank brigades with an LL in the Lend-Lease box. These arrive according to the Soviet event table. Place the 3 Soviet port garrison units in their port hexes. Place the 4th Guards Cavalry Corps in the holding box. Place the 2 Black Sea Fleet markers in the unavailable box. They become available through the event table. How to begin. Place the turn marker on the 1 space of the turn track, the VP marker on the 0 space of the victory point track, the 6 replacement markers on the 0 space of the accumulated replacement track, and the phase marker on the axis primary impulse of the game phase track. The German initial phase is skipped, with the exception of the die roll of the Brandenburgers. Game length, 14 turns. The tournament scenario. This scenario lasts only 10 turns. See, there's another spelling mistake. It's missing an S. Set up, this should be 2 words, set up the game using the campaign game setup instructions. Special rules. Do not roll for the Italian Alpine Corps on turn 5. It is not used in this scenario. Axis victory. The Axis player wins by controlling at least 14 victory points worth of victory point hexes by the end of turn 7. There should be an apostrophe there. Victory is checked only during the victory check phase. Soviet victory. The Soviet player wins if the Axis player fails to achieve victory by the end of the game or fails the sudden death victory conditions on turn 6. Design note. Historically, the German 17th Army took Novorossiysk by turn 7, and the 1st Panzer Army was on the Terek River. That would equate to 14 victory points.